Do you have a motorized sit-stand desk? Would you like to be able to control it via Home Assistant? Are you so good with electronics that you can barely spell electronics? Boy, have you come to the right place. Stay tuned, and I'll show you how to make this happen. Hey, I'm Jeff, and you're watching Fast How To, a channel where I discuss smart homes, smart home products and tech, and other related nerd topics. If that sounds like something you're interested in, or if you just like to hang out with me, go ahead and slap that subscribe button. Appreciate it. Quick, before I get started, if you don't care about the story of how I got here with this project, and you just want the nerd bits, I've added chapters. Feel free to skip ahead. Throughout the course of my career as an IT consultant, I've bumped into standing desks here and there at various customer sites. I always thought they were really cool, but I remember also thinking that they were kind of a novelty and they were way too expensive for any mere mortal to buy and put in their house. I'm talking like 2011, maybe 2012. The ones I was seeing that some customers had were like 8 or 9 grand. No thanks. Then I changed jobs a few years ago, and the first time I went into the office at my new job, I was in town for a week. All the desks are sit-stand. Being that I'm a bit older now than I was when I bumped into those early models, I took full advantage of the one at the office. Having used it every day for an entire week, and then coming back here to my home office, I quickly realized that my back is not as limber as it once was, and decades of sitting at a desk had taken its toll on me. If you have a desk job and you don't have a standing desk, trust me, you need to get one now, before it's too late. Something about an ounce of prevention and a pound of cure and all that. Anyway, late last year, I finally decided to take the leap and I got a couple of standing desks. I chose to go with Vari since they got great reviews and they have a great weight rating and they happen to be having a pretty kick-ass sale between Black Friday and Christmas, and all that is not even to mention the warranty. So I got a 72 by 30 and a 48 by 30 and arranged them in the shape of an L, which you can kind of see behind me. And then I hardly used them. There's a button. You push it and the desk goes up. You push it again and the desk goes down. It'll remember what heights you want it raised and lowered to. It's got 4 memory buttons. You don't even have to dial it in or repeatedly push like up, up, up to get it to where you want it. You just push one button. And I couldn't even remember to do that. I just sat at them like a normal desk. What a waste. I mean, sure. For the first few weeks I used them because they were new to me and it was a novelty and whatever. But then I was off for like 2 weeks or whatever for the holiday season. And the habit just never fully formed. So I remember thinking when I was assembling them, oh, the control panel connects to the main desk controller using an RJ45 jack. I bet there's a way to hack these things. So I went online and I searched and I found a project called Desky by TJ Horner, as I'm sure many of you have if you've ever looked. I'm sure it's a fantastic project and he even sells assembled kits for like $50 or something, which I thought was pretty reasonable. Thing is, it's constantly sold out. Every time I think about it, I'd go look again and yup, sure enough, sold out. Well, after my foray into ESP32 with the Bluetooth proxy and RAT GDO, then I started experimenting with the NFC card reader. That project is still not done, but I'll discuss that mess on the next Friday. Anyhow, now I had a little bit of experience with ESP32s under my belt. So I went and looked at the Desky project on GitHub, thinking I'd make my own. Now, I couldn't quite make sense of exactly what TJ had done, since I am not an electronics expert, and I don't play one on TV, and I also did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. What I am an expert at, relatively speaking, is reading documentation, since that's pretty much what I've done my entire career. So I started trying to read the documentation that TJ so graciously published on his GitHub repo. As it turns out, he actually designed his own PCB and then had them manufactured somewhere, so it's all just one nice, pretty little board. He was nice enough to publish the schematic for his board along with all the rest of his docs, but since I don't know how to read PCB schematics, as I'm sure probably many of you don't either, didn't do me a shit bit of good. So back to the proverbial drawing board. Time goes by and I kept digging. I found a lot of other projects. Some were random blog posts where guys had written some stuff in C or C++ to control the desk, but they hadn't integrated them with Home Assistant. They just made a web interface. And some other projects that were integrated with Home Assistant, but they were super confusing and just all kinds of nonsense. So I picked one. And then I sat down with a D1 Mini, since that's what many of those other projects had used, and I started trying to make it. I heated up my little Pine-Sol soldering iron and got to work soldering a bunch of nonsense together and flashed some firmware on it, and the desk immediately went all the way down, nearly crushing my PC, and then displayed an error message. Yay. After Googling how to reset the desk, it's actually really easy, so don't be scared if it happens to you. I took that code off the D1 Mini and tried again. The next code that I tried, though, did more or less the same thing. Then I started realizing that my soldering skills probably hadn't improved a whole lot since my attempt at building that NFC reader. Yeah, and boy was I right. This then sent me down another rabbit hole. See, the D1 Minis are actually ESP8266, whereas these are ESP32. The ESP32s already have header pins soldered onto them, so I set about learning what the differences between these were, and if I could just replace a D1 with the ESP32, since then I wouldn't have to solder. Happy days! I can! Now all I need is some DuPont jumpers. What about connecting to the desk? Well, I had seen some projects where guys used an RJ45 jack to plug into the control panel, and then they had cut up an RJ45 cable and wired that in so that they could plug that into the desk. I didn't like this idea not one bit, since having a piece of cable permanently attached to the solution just means that when the cable develops a short, you've either got to throw the whole thing out, or you've got to disassemble it and unsolder it, which I suck at, and replace that section of cable. That's just silly. So instead, I got these. Pair of RJ45 jacks with screw terminals, no soldering required. Bonus! If you want to build one of these, I left links to the ESP32, the RJ45 jacks, the DuPont jumpers, all this in the description. So all you've got to do is order the parts and then come back to the video, follow along, and make it happen. I also left a link to the short RJ45 patch cables that I like, in case you happen to need one of those too. So here we go. This is how to assemble one. Here's a close-up view of the wiring. You'll need 6 jumpers for this. For the sake of illustration purposes, I'm going to number the terminals on the RJ45 board 1 through 8 from left to right. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the board with the RJ45 jacks, and on the right-hand side of the screen, I've included a schematic of the pinout for an ESP32. If you're watching this on a phone, you'll probably have to pause and zoom in, but since you're likely trying to actually do this for your Home Assistant install, I'm going to go ahead and assume that when the time comes, you'll be on a PC. So let's move along. Now, note that while you can just stab the DuPont jumpers into the RJ45 terminals like I did here, it's a bit of a tight fit inside the case that way, and you'll bend a couple pins on the ESP32 if you're not really careful, since the end of the DuPont cables on the ESP32 pins will hit the opposite ends on the jacks and kind of overlap a little bit. So before I put this into this case here, I actually cut the ends off the DuPont jumpers, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one before I put this into this pretty case here that I printed. I just used a jeweler's screwdriver on these terminals that I got on Amazon for like $6. I'll leave a link in the description along with the links for all the other parts. Anyhow, with the jacks facing you, the leftmost pin, number 1, is unused. Pin 2 should be connected via a brown wire to GPIO 1. Pin 3 should be connected via a black wire to ground. Pin 4 should be connected via a blue wire to GPIO 14. Pin 5 should be connected via a red wire to the 5-volt power pin. Pin 6 is unused. Pin 7 should be connected via a green wire to GPIO 4. Pin 8 should be connected via a yellow wire to GPIO 5. Great. So now you got all that shit wired up. What are you supposed to do with it? Leave it swinging in the breeze under your desk? That's what old me did, but new me has a 3D printer. So I opened Fusion 360 and I designed this case that holds the parts and has a lid that snaps on and a couple of ears to screw it to the bottom of the desk. And then I exported the drawing to an STL and fed it to my 3D printer, and out popped a case. Not too shabby for having never used Fusion 360 before this, and this being the first thing I've ever designed. Look, there's even a little cutout for the USB port. Let's switch over to the desk though, so that I can go through how to get this thing added to Home Assistant and show you guys the code and whatnot. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is connect the ESP32 to the computer via USB. Mine happens to be micro USB, yours might be USB-C, whatever, just get it connected. And then once we've got that connected, we will head over to Settings, Add-ons, ESP Home. If you don't have ESP Home, pause the video, go and get it, install it, you're going to need it. Open Web UI, and then down in the corner, we'll click New Device. And we're going to name this Big Desk, since this one's for my big desk. Next, Connect. If you don't see this show up, that means you probably don't have the drivers. Go ahead and connect. All right, now that that's completed, we'll go ahead and close that. And now let's take a look at the difference between a blank ESP32 file and a configured one. So this is the one from my small desk. This is the one from my big desk here that we just added. So let's step through all the code for what we're going to be doing here. Now, before we get started, I want to be clear that I didn't write this code from scratch. A lot of this work was already done by people who know a lot more about electronics than I do, so I'm not trying to take credit for writing all this stuff. What I did was take what they had done and customize it to suit my liking and to make it be able to do what I wanted to do with my desk, but the bulk of the heavy lifting was done by SCEB and some other folks on the forums. Starting at the top, line 2 is how the ESP32 will be identified by Home Assistant. This needs to be all lowercase, no spaces. Line 3 is the friendly name. So in this case, it's small desk. The other one's going to be big desk. And then lines 4 through 9 tell this what we want to happen when it boots. So in this case, we're going to delay 5 seconds, and then we're going to wake the desk and get the height. And that is defined later on down in the code. We'll get there. Lines 11 through 27 are all standard ESP Home stuff and should already be present in your file. Don't change any of that. Beginning with line 32, this is where we set the IP address for the device. Now, I set all of mine to be static because it makes OTA updates easier. So line 33 is the IP, line 34 is the gateway, 35 is the subnet mask, and 36 is the DNS server. I've covered all that in a previous video. I commented out the fallback access point because I don't need it. Lines 43 to 48 pull in SCEB's custom components from his GitHub repo Beginning on line 50, the UART is specified along with the baud rate and which GPIO pin should be used for that. Line 55 begins the configuration of the Desky component, which comes from SCB's code. Line 56 is the ID. Don't change that. 57 specifies the timeout. Don't change that either. 58 begins the height section. Also, don't change that. 59 is the display name for the height of the desk. You can go ahead and change that if you want to. That's what's going to be shown in Home Assistant. And we'll take a look at that here after we get through the code. 60 is the ID for the desk height component that'll be used in Home Assistant. 61 is the decimal accuracy, in this case 1 decimal place. 62 is the unit of measurement. I'm in the United States, so I use inches. 63 through 66 are filters. Don't change any of those. 67 begins the section that says what should happen when there's a value being provided. Basically, what we're doing on 68 through 77 is setting the value of the binary sensor based on whether or not the height data is changing. 79 through 88 define the binary sensor named desk is moving. 90 through 98 is the button to stop the desk from moving. 100 through 126 is the button for go to height X. So 107 through 110 is the if statement that's going to determine if we need to move the desk up or down to reach the desired new height. And then 111 through 118 here, this moves the desk down. And 119 through 126, of course, move it up then. 128 through 154 are the same thing, but instead of going to height X, right? Instead of going to height X, now we're going to go to the sitting height, which will be defined later. And then 156 through 182 here are going to go to the standing height. And the rest of that code, of course, is the same. Figure out if we need to go up or down, and then move it. 184 begins the number section. These are the spots that you're going to want to modify stuff. Okay, so 186 through 195 is for the desk target height, also known as target height X. You are going to want to change lines 191 and 192 for the min and max value to your liking. And then 195 will be the initial value when you fire this up, so set those how you like. 197 through 207 is the lower limit of the desk. So this means that Home Assistant will never try to move the desk lower than whatever value you specify here on the slider that this is creating. And we'll get to that again once we get through the code. Lines 203 and 204 set the minimum and maximum value for that slider. And again, 207 is the initial value. Line 203 should always be greater than the actual lowest that your desk is capable of going in order to avoid errors. So my desk is actually capable of going like 25.1 or 25.2, so I set it to 26. Lines 209 through 219 are basically the same thing, but this is for the upper limit. So set the min and max value for that slider. And again, the max value on that should be less than what the actual max height of your desk is capable of. Mine does like 50.6 or 50.7, so I set the max to be 50. And the initial value there will be 49. And the reason that we're defining that lower limit and upper limit is because it is completely possible for you to send a command to your desk to try and move it outside of what it's physically capable of doing, and that'll give you an error on your controller, and nobody wants an error on their controller, right? So set the min and max. So 221 through 231 here. So this defines the stopping offset. The stopping offset is because I haven't found anybody yet who has figured out how to make the desk slow down when it starts approaching the target height like the factory controller does. And I sure as hell don't know how to do it. So instead, it just goes full speed and then cuts the signal that tells it to keep going. So this results in the desk overshooting the target height by just a little bit. So this slider here is to fine tune that adjustment. So on mine, I found that 4/10 of an inch is about perfect. So if I'm trying to get to 30 inches and I'm coming down to it, then it'll cut that command at 30.4 and it'll kind of coast down a little bit. Mess around with that a little bit. You'll probably have to adjust that based on the speed of your desk. Lines 233 through 243 define the standing height slider. So you'll want to set a min and a max for the standing height along with an initial value. Don't change any of the rest of these except 239, 240, and 243. And then 245 through 255 is the same thing, but this is for the sitting height. So again, you'll want to change lines 252 and 251 for the min and max value of that slider. And then you'll want to define an initial value on 255. 257 begins defining the three important switches for this solution. 259 through 268 is the button to get the desk height, wake up and get height, which was referenced in the startup section. And then line 264 specifies the GPIO pin to be used. And then 270 through 283 is the raise desk button. 275 specifies the GPIO pin to be used there. And then you can see here on 282 that this references the upper limit. So we want to stop, of course, before we get to that upper limit. And then lastly, we've got 285 through 298 is the lower desk switch. And the GPIO pin is defined on 290. And 297, of course, then uses the lower limit that was defined previously. Now, if you don't want to pause the video and type in all 298 lines of code and hope that there's no typos, my patrons have access to download all that code, as well as all the code from my videos, from all the other videos, over on patreon.com. In addition to this code, I've also posted the STL files for the case that I designed that holds all this stuff, so you don't just have some random wires and nonsense hanging from the bottom of your desk. Stop by, check it out. You can scan this QR code here, probably. Benefits are available starting for just $3 a month, and that also gets you periodic copies of my complete dashboard, configuration, and automations YAML files. Additional benefits such as early access to advertising-free videos, free t-shirts, Discord access, and exclusive giveaways, and more are also available. To all my current patrons, thank you so much for supporting the channel and helping me make cool projects like this to teach you guys about. Now, if you don't have a 3D printer, or if you would just like to buy one of these things already all pre-assembled and ready to go, let me know in the comments, and if enough people are interested, I'll see if I can figure out some way of setting up a payment system and whatnot and see what we can do to make that happen. Of course, I'm only going to be selling the case and the hardware, and I'll be putting it all together for you. You are still going to need to plug it into your computer and follow the steps to get it added to ESP Home, and then get the code that I've shown you here and put the code on it and configure it and so forth. I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into this just yet, so I don't know what the price will be, but it'll depend on how many people are interested in them, what kind of quantity I can order components in based on interest, how much a payment processor is going to charge me, all that kind of shit. I would guess probably somewhere in the $50 to $60 range, but don't hold me to that. Anyway, if you're interested, let me know in the comments and I'll try and figure something out. So let's get back to this here. So now that we've got our 298 lines of code that I've shown you, I am going to go ahead and get that all set up for Big Desk, and I'll be right back. All right, so now that I've got everything in here for Big Desk, all that's left to do is click Save, and then we'll click Install, and I'm going to choose Plug into this computer because it's connected to the computer. Select my device, click Connect, and it'll connect, prepare the installation, and away it'll go. All right, once the installation is finished, you'll see this. Go ahead and close that. And then if we go over to notifications, you should see new device discovered. Click check it out. Then just click configure, submit. And it's still rebooting, so we'll give it a second. There we go, finish. And now if we open ESP Home, we'll see Big Desk. So we go ahead and click on that, and here's all of our controls. So these top three are just buttons. If you press these buttons, this one here, the top one, go to height X. That goes along with the target height X slider. So this is the minimum and maximum that you defined for your target height. So by default, it was set at 30, I had it, whatever. Go to sitting height. We'll use the sitting height slider, so be sure to define that. Mine is set at 30, since that's where I like it. Go to the standing height button. We'll use the standing height slider. Mine is set at, the default was 46. I actually like it at 48, so I'm going to move that up to 48. There we go, 48, all right. Lower limit is the lower limit that we had discussed, so I'm going to set that at 26. And then the upper limit is default on mine is 49. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there since I don't ever really go above 48. Lower desk, raise desk, and request desk height. These three switches you should never really use directly, so I would not put them on your dashboard. And stop desk will stop the desk if it's moving. Up, down, whatever, that will stop it. And then stopping offset, again, helps you not to overshoot the height, your target height. And so that may need to be adjusted a little bit based on the speed of your individual desk. Below all the controls, we've got a couple of sensors. You've got desk height and whether or not the desk is moving. So currently my small desk is at 30 inches high. All right, so now all we need to do is raise the desk and then unplug the controller and plug it into one of these two jacks, and then take an Ethernet patch, plug it into the other one, and then plug this into the controller, and your front panel controller will be in the other one, and you'll be all set. This will get power from the controller underneath the desk, and life is good. You'll be able to make your desk go up and down. Take just a minute or two for it to boot. You'll see it show up in Home Assistant, and you'll be good. Next up, let's take a look at the automation that I'm using to force me to stand up. So I've seen a lot of people that just use contact sensors and then turn some lights red or something if the desk doesn't move for a period of time, or make a TTS announcement or whatever. Where's the fun in that? I built this to not only know the height of my desk, but to actually control it. So my automation raises the desk when I've been sitting for too long. It does turn my lights bright red 1 minute beforehand, so I'm not caught off guard right in the middle of doing something or spill my coffee or whatever. But I haven't written any way to interrupt that. The desk is gonna go up. The changing of the lights is just a nice warning to say, hey, get ready. Once it gets to the top, the lights do turn white again. And when I lower it, the timers will start again for raise it and the notifications. So let's take a look at those. So the first automation has two triggers: when the small desk height changes or when the time is equal to 8 o'clock. No conditions, and the actions is an if statement that checks to make sure the desk is below 36 inches. And then if it is, I start two timers, time to stand and desk move warning. If the height is above 36 inches, then I cancel those two. But Jeff, your automation has no conditions. And then the first thing in your action section is a condition. Why not just move the lower than 36 inch condition to the conditions section? Great question. The only thing you get with conditions up here in the conditions section is if this is true, then do these things. It doesn't allow for you to say, if this is false, then do these other things instead, which is the else condition down here. So anyway, before I was so rudely interrupted by myself, let's go take a look at the other automation. So this automation is triggered when either the time to stand timer finishes or when the desk move warning timer finishes. You can see that I've assigned trigger IDs to both of these. The time to stand has a trigger ID of move, and desk move warning has a trigger ID of warn. So naturally, I'm using a choose block, but before we get to the choose block, I am using a couple conditions here, and they are that the desk height is below 36 inches. Since if it's above 36 inches, I'm going to assume I'm already standing, so I don't need to move it. Next, I want to make sure that it's a workday, so confirm that the workday sensor is on. I don't need the desk going up and down on Christmas and on the weekends, right? So under the actions section then, I know this is a little bit out of order, but we're going to start with option 2, which is the warning, because it'll make more sense that way. So when this is triggered by the event ID warn, then we're going to check and make sure that it is after 8 a.m. and it is before 3:59 p.m. And we're going to go ahead and turn the office lamp left and office lamp right, which are the two light bars, or the upright lights behind my desk here. We're going to turn those bright red, brightness 100%, color bright red. Then we're going to delay for 15 seconds, and then we're going to do the same thing again. And the reason for that is just that sometimes one or the other of those two lights doesn't pick up this command, and it's irritating when that happens. So I just send the command twice just to make sure. So now I've got those lights on back there, bright red, warning me, hey, your desk is about to go up, right? So then if we take a look at option 1, which is triggered by the move event ID, we're going to make sure that it is after 9 a.m. and before 4 p.m. So that warning timer is 59 minutes and the actual move timer is an hour. So because they both start at 8 a.m., this is never going to happen before 9 a.m. So just in the interest of easy logic. But what's going to happen then is we're going to press the button to raise my small desk to standing height. Then we're going to delay for 15 seconds while it goes up. And then we're going to turn those two backlights back to white and set them back to just 7% brightness, which is where I like them. They're just sort of decorative during the day. And then delay for 15 seconds and then do the same thing again, because there's issues with them picking up commands. I don't know why. Otherwise, they work pretty good. But so now you're probably wondering about the timers, right? Where did those come from? Well, I made them. Let's go take a look. Settings, Devices and Services, go to the Helpers tab. And here is the desk move warning timer. And you can see that that is 59 minutes. And the time to stand timer is here. And that is 1 hour. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up. If you're interested in buying one of these, please remember to let me know in the comments. If you've stuck with me to the end here, I'd just like to say Merry Christmas, and I hope that you all enjoyed this video. I hope that I accomplished my goal of teaching you all about how to integrate your standing desk with Home Assistant, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode's t-shirt. Thanks for watching, and until next time, go automate something, will ya?